Welcome back to the hustle and welcome back to the grind, everybody. Great to have you back. Have you ever had experiences where somebody left you feeling guilty? Somebody gave you the silent treatment. Maybe your boss at work set you up for failure, gave you unreasonable expectations only to find you fall flat on your face and then held you fully accountable. Well, these are all classic traits of abusive psychological behavior and things that a lot of us fall victim to just because somebody wants to hold power over. They want to leverage your insecurities. They want to leverage the power that it takes to make you feel rotten. And unfortunately, we're in a society today where there's no shortage of people looking to control power over you, power over me, power over everybody. I mean, ultimately, people are looking to make a buck, hustle, trying to do it on other people's backs and their skins. And what it does to the victims of this abusive behavior is it leaves people very shy, very introverted. People no longer have trust or faith in society or humanity, and they usually just want to do their own thing. Now, while there's a lot of introverts, and I find myself a little bit more in the introverted style, I've always been that way, the bottom line is it can convert somebody who's normally an outgoing, spry personality, somebody with a zest for life, somebody who loves and enjoying life to its fullest, and it can actually turn somebody like that upside down, inside out, and put them on their heels to a position and a place in their life where all of a sudden they're an introvert when they never once were. They lose that attitude about wanting to be around people. They don't care anymore, and it just affects their mental health. This is an unfortunate circumstance, and many of us fall prey to people with abusive behaviors and using psychological warfare on each and every one of us. And sadly, we're seeing it more and more and more. You know, with social media and all the clever attitudes and people out there with all kinds of great ideas, it often puts people in a very insecure position to where they no longer want to even communicate with other people. They want to do their own thing and stay far away from everybody. So there's 5 key traits I'm going to share with you that are clear signs that people, whether it's close to you, whether it's your co-workers, whether it's people that maybe your boss, maybe it's family, maybe it's relatives, maybe it's even friends. Sometimes it's people that are very close to you, and quite often it's people you see on a regular basis. And when you see the trends there, it starts to all resonate. It all starts to make sense as to the type of behavior that is being inflicted on you. And it's sad because in today's day and age, we should all be here to try to prop each other up. But if every time you come out of a conversation feeling worn out, feeling knocked down, and feeling less happy about life in general out of a conversation, then that's clear signs that you may be on the receiving end of some abusive behavior or abusive treatment. Now, the first one I want to mention is there's 5, as I've said, and realistically, the first one, not necessarily in this order, has to do with hot and cold. One day they're hot, one day they're cold. And so often what that means is you come in one day, say for example, and I had people like this. There was one particular person in my workspace that I know very, very well, that one day you'd come in and they were hot. Use the hot. They like you, they treat you well. There's all kinds of love and happiness and joy, and you feel good to talk to them, and you feel good because they're talkative, they're bringing you into the love triangle, the circle. You feel like, you know what, this is good. I think we have a great communication. Things are going really well. And I feel good about this relationship as coworkers. And then, lo and behold, the next day they come in and they don't even say hi to you. And then, of course, the next day after that, or maybe a couple days later, they're really warm and friendly again. Now, the first thing goes through your mind is, okay, maybe they're going through something. And quite often, we can't judge a book by its cover. See, realistically, we have to give people the benefit of the doubt. And quite often, there are people that are going through things. Maybe they went home that one night and all of a sudden they had an issue. Maybe they got some bad news and you can't tell. I mean, we have to give everybody the benefit. But the bottom line is when we're dealing with somebody that's doing this consistently and we're seeing this behavior day in, day out, week in, week out, and this is almost seems to be a little bit of a trend or a routine, then it becomes more clear that this in fact could be an abuse behavior, because them doing the hot, cold thing creates a sort of confusion on your part, makes you a little bit insecure. You don't know how to treat it. And then when they're warm again, then all of a sudden you feel, oh, you almost feel double down in terms of excitement and joy that they actually brought you back in and that they're treating you well again. So it's a form of control, a very mild form of control, where they actually manage the way you feel on a day in, day out basis. And it is a form of control, and it's very abusive behavior. It's a sad state. We've all been there, and we all know somebody that we can probably speak of that have like those days, the hot days, the cold days. One day they love you, the next day they don't. So anyway, that's one level of behavior that I no longer can tolerate, and clearly it's something that you need to be very mindful of. Another one that I have is invalidation. They invalidate. There's cases where maybe, I've had situations where I got a little wound up. I'll be honest, we all get emotional from time to time, where I put in a lot of effort on a big project that was asked of me, and there was some big deliverables, and I had to take care of this. Okay, so then all of a sudden, I found myself presenting this project in a group setting, only to have many of my peers, including the supervisor, literally critique it, and not in a constructive way. Put it down and basically put me back on my heels. Well, naturally, like a lot of people, you do take constructive criticism to a point, but there's times when it feels like it's unjust and you get a little emotional, okay? I mean, you might raise your voice, you might get a little bit excited. We all have those moments. None of us are perfect. But all of a sudden somebody says, why are you being so sensitive? Why are you crying over spilt milk? It's no big deal. That's not a problem. And they basically shrug off your feelings. It's a way to invalidate. It's a way to reduce your impact, but more importantly, it's a way to make your thoughts and feelings to become far less important. Not important enough to have an impact on people next to you, maybe your coworkers, maybe a friend or a family member. It's a way that they can basically knock you down and say, look, it's not that serious. It's really not that serious. Take it easy. That is so condescending. And when people don't do that, or when people do that, it clearly is a sign that they don't really care what you have to say. They don't care about your feelings. And quite honestly, they'd be much better off and better well served actively listening. Try to understand. Empathy, absolutely. That's a great trait. And not enough people today have a form of empathy. It's one thing if you don't actually care. It's another thing to act like it. We know that everybody has their world and everybody has their things. But at least if somebody's going through something, maybe try to see it through their perspective, through their lenses. Try to see it from their side of the table. Instead, don't shut them down. Say it's not a big deal. It's all good. Why are you being so sensitive? Instead of playing that card, you know what? Listen to what they have to say. Actively participate in the conversation and maybe have it two-way instead of critiquing. You know what? We all have bad days. We all have good days. And unfortunately, that's a form of psychological abuse. And again, when people start telling me, no, don't worry, you're making a mountain out of a molehill, that's another indication that they really don't care what I have to say or think. And that's when I further shut down, back off, and become even further introverted. I just have no time for people that don't have time for me and put my feelings on the back burner. And while all 5 of these really are relatable in many ways, whether it's personal, whether it's family, friends, a lot of them are relatable directly to work. This one even more importantly, and work-related, I mean, many of us have had bosses, supervisors, managers, any of those people that are considered somebody that would sign our paycheck or could, give us a walking papers. That person, setting you up with unreasonable expectations will inevitably lead you to a failure. See, I've had this, I'm sure a lot of us have had these conversations with your supervisor where they set you up with some almost insurmountable task, a situation that takes a lot of horsepower, a lot of resources, a lot of effort, and knowing full well that with the current state, you don't have either the capability, the resources, or generally the ability to tackle that task. And you know for a fact when they're setting you up for failure, and the worst part is once they set you up for failure, you go out, you proceed, because most of us are relatively high performers. We all try to do our best, and everybody wants to deliver as expected. I mean, these jobs, these bosses, these supervisors, nobody wants to let them down because it could impact, our performance, could impact pay, it could impact any kind of moving up the rung. So nobody wants to let them down. But what ends up happening quite often is at the end of this, when it's time to hand in a deliverable, we find ourselves not quite making the grade, and then there's that conversation. You knew from the get-go that there would be a challenge in getting that done, but a supervisor that knows full well that you're going to be set up for failure and does it anyway, that's a form of mind games, and one in which you definitely want to steer away from. When you have a supervisor or a boss like that, you got to figure that out, navigate through it. I mean, it's difficult in the corporate world today, but that's clearly a sign of psychological abuse. The next one that I want to talk about, another one that's so important and is hit so close to home, and I'm sure a lot of you have been impacted by this, are people that like to make you feel guilty. I mean, it's not uncommon, sadly nowadays, to have people shedding accountability. We see it everywhere, and it's a constant. I mean, we see it in government, we see it in the workplace, we see it all over the place. Nobody wants to take ownership for failures. They only want to take ownership for the wins. I had a supervisor once that was great at taking credit. When we did great things as a department and our peers, he would often take the credit from directors and above. He obviously had, like to be heard and like to be seen and like to have those accolades tied directly to him. Then, unfortunately, when there's something that didn't work out quite as expected, and it became a situation that wasn't so favorable, he quickly decided that he was going to step over to the side. He literally told me that. In a performance conversation, he told me once, look, Mark, if you don't get this right, I'm going to step on over to the side and you're going to wear it all. You're going to own this. He literally said this to me right as we're speaking to each other right now. It's a sad state, but there's many of those toxic bosses that should be supporting the team, should be supporting their staff, but quite clearly it became very evident early on through these conversations that I was not going to be supported and I was going to be hung out to dry. So they often left you feeling guilty for everything you did. And it didn't take me very long to figure out what my manager was up to and the kind of challenges that I would be faced with. See, the guilt was setting in very early on. So it didn't matter whether I was doing something good, if I wasn't doing something so good. Maybe I thought I was doing a great job at something. I never got recognized, but I'll tell you this much for free. If things didn't go as planned, if things didn't go as the ask went, if things went a little bit off the rails, trust me, there was more than enough guilt to go around just for this cowboy. See, guilt is something that they drop on you and they will never accept it for themselves. They'll strictly drop the guilt bomb on you time and time again. And I had my share of that. And people that like to make you feel guilty over everything is clearly a form of psychological abuse. And if you know people in your personal life that will never take any sense of ownership on the negative, but they'll only take ownership on the positive, and they have no shortage in opportunities to make you feel guilty about something or constantly remind you of scenarios that maybe you didn't come up clean, maybe things didn't work out as planned, then those are the types of people you want to put them in check or certainly keep them at an arm's reach, almost like that. We don't need people like that in our lives that are constantly making us feel guilty. That's such a toxic behavior, and unfortunately one in which today, in a land of zero accountability, I mean, just look around with some of the politicians, we have no accountability, but everybody wants to point at everybody else and make them look guilty. And clearly, we've all known people just like that. Another toxic trait that's abuse in my books are something called the silent treatment. And I think we've all been through that. And, we've all experienced that. People, whether it's people close to us or at work, where they give you a bit of that silent treatment. Maybe there's a disagreement about something. Maybe you had an argument or a disagreement and somebody gives you the silent treatment. Well, the silent treatment is such a powerful tool. It's a toxic, abusive, powerful tool. People that like to do that often like to put you in a position on your heels, make you feel like they've got one up. Because I'll tell you, if they've got that on you, then you feel like you're constantly on the edge. You don't know when that explosive conversation is going to happen. You also don't know when they're going to want to talk to you. If all of a sudden, one of the worst things, all of a sudden out of the blue, the silent treatment has been obvious, they won't talk to you, and then all of a sudden at the end of it, maybe there was 2 days of silent treatment, lo and behold, all of a sudden there's a text or an email or a phone call that says, oh, we need to talk. You follow that up with the silent treatment. What do you think that does to a person that is actually on the receiving end? What do you think that does to their mental state of mind, their mental health? What do you think that does to people in general? That does not make them feel good. That does not make them feel good about themselves, the situation, the relationship. They don't feel good about much of anything because they feel like no matter what they do, they're in a world of hurt. They're in a pile of trouble. And see, when you're on the receiving end of the silent treatment, you quite often feel like that dog. Have you ever had a dog where, for example, a pet, where they crap on your carpet and then you turn around and you look at little Ralphie, hey, little Ralphie, what's going on? And you just look at them. They know that you know. You don't even have to talk. Silent treatment. The dog knows everything what you're getting at, and the dog all of a sudden puts the ears down and puts its rump down and knows, and it's guilty. Well, that's often how we feel when we're getting the silent treatment or the guilt treatment. If you're having that person that's making you feel guilty, or you're having that person that's giving you the silent treatment, that puts you in this position where you feel lesser, you feel lower, you don't feel like you're at the same level. And that's a level of power that a lot of these people love. They love taking that sense of control and power over a relationship. And a relationship should never be a power struggle. We're not talking about the Cold War here. We're talking about a relationship, whether it's whether it's coworkers, whether it's a boss and a worker, whether it's husband, wife, whether it's kids and parents, whether it's friends, cousins, aunts, uncles. Doesn't matter the relationship. We should all be on the level. There should be empathy, should be part of the conversation. Sympathy, empathy. We should all feel good to be able to communicate, because as soon as you start putting people in the receiving end of a lot of these toxic behaviors, like the silent treatment, like guilt, like setting people up for failure and beyond, you start doing that to people, they're less inclined to speak up. They don't want to talk. They're going to go introverted. If anything, they're going to start to retract like this, and they're not going to want to be a big part of any relationship that's related to the person on the abuser end. It's just a bad behavior set, and one in which I'm sure most of us know people like this. You could probably name drop somebody in each one of those categories, but realistically, the best thing to do is just honestly distance yourself from people like that. In most cases, unless of course maybe it's not by accident, it's always worth a communication, because honestly, a good discussion, a good heart-to-heart communication sometimes is all it takes to say, look, I don't like the way you've been treating me, or I don't like the way you handle this situation. And sometimes that's enough just to call it out. I mean, it's like the old bully syndrome, right? Bullies are going to continue to bully you until you call them out. Most bullies will collapse once you actually confront them. The same thing goes here. If you've got somebody on the abuser side, you definitely want to call them out sooner than later. Either that or just distance yourself altogether. Hope to see each and every one in the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.